Welcome to Beyond the Fine Print, the podcast where we help you simplify the ever-evolving world of commercial laws and technology and answer the major questions facing lawyers today. I'm your host, Rory O'Keefe, and in each episode, we'll be breaking through the jargon so you can stay ahead, keep it cool, and take control back. Now let's get started. Welcome back to Beyond the Fine Print. I'm Rory O'Keefe, your host, lawyer, and someone who's definitely clicked things I should not have. So today's episode is about why humans, not hackers, make or break organizational security and how we can build a culture that actually protects people, data, and operations. So hopefully you're going to learn why most organizations still run the office-style security theater instead of genuine behavior change, what a strategic human firewall is and why it matters, how trust and denial, the succession style, quietly fuel most breaches, what interaction or interactive training actually works, and how leaders scale. All this without needing the budget of the matrix. There's no one better to walk you through this than today's guest. Robert Siciliano is a security analyst, author, media voice, and one of the most recognizable educators in personal and corporate protection. He's appeared on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, CNBC, Anderson Cooper, 360 Degrees. I'm a big fan of that. The Today Show, and even quoted across USA Today, Forbes, the New York Times, and more. He sits on the board of the Identity Theft Resource Center, contributes to the Realtor Safety Initiative, and once bought a working ATM on Craigslist for $750 just to prove how fragile our real-world systems are. Robert, welcome to Beyond the Fine Print.
You did your research, man.
We do.
That's good. Yeah.
If for no other reason, just to embarrass our guests. That's all.
Yeah. So I bought that ATM off of Craigslist. I got it for $750. Guy was asking $1,000. I talked him down. And when I brought it back to my home office, stuck it in my garage, I actually brought a hacker friend of mine, a good guy hacker. And he was like so excited. You know, he just couldn't believe that we were buying an ATM, you know. And once we bought it, we're in my truck. He's got the manual because, you know, we got the manual off the guy. And he's giggling, like a schoolboy. And he's like, can I take the manual home? You know, because that's what you guys do, you know? And he calls me at 5:30 the next morning. He's all wired, drank like a half a case of Red Bull, read through the whole manual. He's like, can I come over? Can I play with it? He plugs the ATM in at like 6:30 because I was like, come in an hour. I made coffee. He plugs the ATM in. He's got the manual in one hand and he's punching codes into the keypad in the other. And it starts to print a receipt. But the receipt was like a long, like 30-foot receipt. Like the whole spool was printing out, like opposed to like a regular printed out and cut it off like in 6 inches. And he starts cracking up. He's like, look at this. And I go and I check out the receipt and it's like over 1,000 credit and debit card numbers. So the guy that I bought the ATM from forgot to clear off the ATM's logs. And I got like the last 6 to 8 months of transactions, which for somebody like me is like a gold mine, you know, like what can I do with this? And the first thing I did was call Fox News, you know, and they sent a guy over, a camera guy, a guy with a fuzzy mic and a reporter. I stuck a car battery inside the ATM with a step-up transformer and a camera and a skimmer. Because, you know, I got a camera and a skimmer. And we deployed it into Faneuil Hall in downtown Boston. And immediately, people started to use the ATM. Now, it didn't dispense any cash. So they got, you know, frustrated. They walk away. And the reporter would like kind of go up to them and say, hey, do you know what you just did? And showed them video of what they did. And they get like a little, you know, flummoxed. And we'd let them delete the video and such. And we did that all day long until a big, burly Boston biker cop comes up to us. He sees what we're up to. He's like, get that thing out of here or I'm going to arrest all of you. So we packed it up, moved over to Fenway Park in downtown Boston and set it up all over again. I got like 5-6 TV shows out of that.
There's so many questions. My criminal law days are coming back to me. Criminal defense lawyer, just before anybody's listening to things. But yeah, it's all coming back to me. Also, I did spend a summer working in Boston, in Cambridge, in the, for those in Boston who know, the Bull and Finch, the former Cheers bar. So I used to work there and I was one of those happy people, super happy, overly excited people selling stuff. You know, this is really cool. Although I'll let everybody else decide because I know there's a lot of lawyers listening and they'll go, oh, he just made that mistake. Yeah. Anyway, let's begin with the whole purpose of this episode is really to talk about a corporate elephant in the room. So most organizations, they're treating security training the way Michael Scott treats HR policies. You skim it, smile, and promptly ignore. So why do most organizations struggle to make security training meaningful?
You mentioned security theater, and I don't know that like the CISOs engage in theater in regards to like the systems they put in place. But I think what they do is they're ignoring the human aspect of security, and they're just focusing and functioning on the tools that they've been provided in regards to compliance training, which essentially is phishing simulation training. And over the past, 10, 15 years, we've boxed up all of this, product and service that you buy for so many pennies or dollars per seat. And that's the security awareness training that you're providing your employees that essentially is designed to provide them awareness, check that box, and you've got metrics in regards to, okay, who's still vulnerable and who needs, more or less training and so forth. That's good, but it's not enough. It doesn't really affect the employee where they're at in their life. It just says, hey, do this, don't do this. And if you fail, these are the consequences. If you think about it, security itself has been around for thousands of years, since the beginning of man. Cybersecurity has been around for 20, 25, 30 years. It's a brand new thing. It's brand new in the evolution of our species. And so all of a sudden, our employees need to engage this training that is designed to prevent them from engaging a sociopath and a psychopath who's well organized crime that understands exactly how humans choose and decide and how they click. And you're expecting that this digital tool is going to just solve all your problems. And I've found that it doesn't. Yeah, the metrics say, okay, it's working, but is it solving the problem? No. Is there anything called 100% security? Absolutely not. But that doesn't mean you can't move the needle a little further. And by addressing the root of the problem, and the root of the problem is not cybersecurity vulnerabilities. It's not software. It's not patching and operating systems. It's the human. And the root of the human's problem is their biological makeup. And that's not being talked about in security awareness training other than how I deliver it, frankly.
It's interesting because for a lot of us listening, and I've been in multiple companies over that, and my role as a fractional general counsel means I sit within a lot of companies. So I have to, before I can start doing any work for anybody, I have to complete their training course, which is usually half an hour or different segments. One's on phishing, one's on data protection, and my worry as a lawyer who advises on cybersecurity and data protection is if I get any of those questions wrong, I just go, hope nobody's watching. But it could be something very simple. But we're all used to the cartoon style training, the video style training. Now it's all using an AI person pretending to talk on behalf of the company with a very, very brilliant smile, perfect teeth. And they don't look like they've ever slept. They've slept too much, actually, rather than anything else. So we're all just naturally looking at them going, I hate you because you've had sleep and you're looking amazing. You're obviously not a lawyer. So we let you move on. But it's very much a checkbox exercise. And I think a lot of employees know that they'll have to do their annual checkbox exercise of a security training. I have to remember what I know about phishing and spear phishing. I have to know what hackers can do. I have to know about people can drop USB keys, don't pick them up, don't put it into your laptops and all that. And on the flip side, you've got really sophisticated security protocols in place, developed by the CISO, by the CTO, paid for by the CFO, demanded by the CEO, risk assessed by legal and others in order to ensure that they can function as a bank, for example. So like in the European context, the Digital Operation Resilience Act brought in a whole series of requirements, and they vaguely mention a requirement around appropriate training. And so you need to show a regulator you've done appropriate training. And I'm just mindful that you've got $6 billion worth of GDPR fines since 2018. And you've got TikTok just last year allegedly breaching, let's see where that goes, but $600 million in fines for unlawful transfers to China. And then we added on top of that in the last 3 years, we've seen a surge in AI-powered attacks, where I read in one report, 75% of cybersecurity professionals are reporting major increases in sophistication and frequency. So does the compliance training even begin to address this new threat landscape?
Well, it's certainly a start, and it's necessary. And I certainly don't have any, bad feelings towards compliance training. It's necessary. It has to be done. But there is a conversation that needs to be had in regards to, okay, so what are we missing? What are we not addressing in that regard? And I don't know that conversation has been had effectively. And while I, speak to company officers all the time, they continually say, well, we need metrics. We need metrics. I mean, that's the only way that we can solve these problems. It's like, Well, from an engineering perspective, I get that. But from a human perspective, like you don't raise a family, you don't build a relationship with metrics. You don't engage humans one-on-one with metrics. You talk to humans and you find out, okay, what is the overall issue that you're having here? And let's flesh it out. Let's discuss it. Let's have a conversation about it. There is not a conversation when it comes to compliance training. It is a lecture. It's do this, don't do that. And these are the repercussions as a result if you don't follow these directions. That's not how you raise a family. That's not how you have a relationship with a spouse. That's not how you deal with humans in general. But that's what is provided. AI is just making it worse in regards to tricking the human into believing that their daughter on the other end of the line is in fact their daughter and screaming bloody murder while another voice is saying pay up or else. And the biological response is pay up, not intellectually, this must be a scam. And so AI is only increasing the gap, the divide between what the human is capable of in regards to managing risk versus effectively managing risk. And I don't know that anybody's really paying any attention to that.
Well, I would say that on the context of deepfakes, voice cloning, for example, I do have certain colleagues working in the basis of voice cloning in the context of like delivery centers, for example. So you'll have people that will, they'll have these automated voices phoning in the delivery centers in order just to do a kind of a denial of service attack, in effect, by clogging up all their phone lines with these fake voices. And so that means that their service levels and their timings and their turnaround times and all that gets worse and worse and worse. And so it could be a competitive advantage to a threat actor in order to affect some sort of failures on that delivery center. But then there's software that can identify if somebody talking is AI bot or not. The question that arose to me was, especially in a data protection context, do I need to protect the data? And I said, well, if you're not processing personal data, then no, GDPR doesn't apply. That's kind of one of the kind of fundamental cruxes of the whole point of it. But there is software that's being developed, but it's always like they're always like a little step ahead and something new comes in. So then you have to figure out something basic from it. But what I'm curious about these things is there's a cost around all of this. But before we get into that piece, because I know that's the question in a lot of people's mind, the time and cost of doing these trainings, you want to get it done. How can you bring this back in? So I want to talk about something that you've spoken about before, the strategic human firewall. And if you could, just what is it and how do we shift employees from obligation to personal investment?
Well, it begins with making security personal. So my philosophy is and has always been, so I got my bones teaching women's self-defense back in the 80s and early 90s. Like that's how I started. And then my small business, I got hacked in 1995. I had an IBM PS1 consultant computer with a Windows 3.0 with a 150 megabyte hard drive and a dial-up connection to AOL. And merchant status, the ability to accept credit cards. I had a very small mail order business that I was building online. And as soon as I started accepting credit cards, within a month, I got hacked in such a way where I lost about $3,000 in product, $3,000 in fraud. Okay. Back then, like I didn't know black hat hacking. I didn't know data breaches. Like that wasn't even a thing. Identity theft hadn't even been a thing yet. But when that happened to me, I realized early on that like what they did was awful. Financially, it was devastating to me because back then $3,000 was like an enormous amount of money to me. But I also understood that like this is awesome what they did. And if they can do that, like think about what you can do in regards to digital fraud, which wasn't even a thing. And I realized back then, like, this is going to be the biggest thing ever. And so from that point on, I started to look at security a little bit differently. It wasn't just personal security, as we discussed, like violence prevention. It was now personal security regarding like my data, my identity, my information, my dollars. And so I saw this early on and recognized that this really is about me. This is about my security. It's about what do I got to do to make sure that this doesn't happen. And so I started to look at security as being personal to me, even virtually. And so since then, and even today, the way I understand security and the way that I don't know that many do is that all security is personal. It all boils down to me and how I consume it and how I see it and how I believe in it and how it shapes me and how I navigate the day. And so when you look at all security being personal and you address the learner in that regard and how it affects them and how their physical being is affected by vulnerability, violence, predators, thieves, then you evolve to your identity, right? Nothing is more personal than your identity. And then there's, of course, your data and your dollars, your passwords, all of that. It all begins with me. And existing security training doesn't actually do any of that. It doesn't talk about any of that, really, like to the degree that it should. It's look at all these vulnerabilities in this email, look at these red flags. These are the motivations. This is what, and so forth. But it's not talking to the individual who's selfish and self-interested. And so the strategic human firewall is about looking at security from the personal perspective. It's a methodology that moves beyond, technical software to secure the human layer, transforming employees into like this active perimeter, so that they look at security as this is how this affects me first. And then from that point, they begin to look at the world a little bit differently. We're talking about changing behavior ever so slightly so that the individual recognizes risk as it pertains to them. It's no different than putting a seatbelt on. A seatbelt is this normal thing that we do by habit because it gives us control over the vehicle. We don't put it on because we're worried. We don't put it on because we're told, well, we kind of do put it on because we're told to, because the car won't stop dinging at us unless we don't. And it's interesting to me about the seatbelt, like it won't stop dinging at you, put it on, because government and manufacturers of automobiles decided like, okay, these humans aren't going to put this thing on. They're not going to get control over the vehicle. We've got to make them do it. And so it's there dinging, 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 making you do it because you just don't want to think that you're going to get in a car accident to begin with. You're lazy. We're lazy. Like we don't want to believe it and we don't do it, but we've been told to. So now we do it. And that has worked, but I don't know if that's going to work with security awareness training. I think we've got to affect the user where they're at in their lives.
And let me just be the counter to this, because
please,
how do you get an employee to care enough in the context that what they're doing is they're just doing their job? This is something that's not part of their day-to-day job. Their job is to create amazing products or innovate in a certain area, develop a new design, or in the legal world, create that great contract, solve that big legal issue, create a new strategy, solve a big case, settle a big case. They're the things that excite us and gets us out of bed. But now we're told that you need to take a personal investment in the security of your employer's company that, let's be fair, may not have given you a pay increase above inflation. You may not have seen a bit of a bonus. The consequences, reputational damage, fines. It could mean your job. It could mean all those things. But how do you get them to bridge that divide that has been emerging over in the work practices between because you talk about like a pre-data age. And that always reminds me of like my father's generation. He was a school teacher. He was nearly 40 years as a teacher and stuck for many of these years with one school. And then you've got friends of his who were dedicated for 25, 30 years, maybe 40 years in the same company. That kind of loyalty, that kind of sense. But the world today, we don't have that sense of loyalty. The workforce today is quite fluid, and where they work where they want to. So as you said, it's a little bit more selfish, self-centered. How do you bridge the gap where they see the personal also applies in the work context?
It's easy once you frame it properly. So all security is personal. That essentially is the core belief that people protect what they love, right? And by teaching someone to secure their, say, child's digital footprint, you create a more secure employee at work, okay? And what that does is it takes them from basic security awareness. And security awareness is, from my perspective, defined as basically from the neck up. It is my intellectual understanding of risk and what the various solutions are and the consequences as a result of not engaging in that awareness and those solutions. Okay. That's security awareness from the neck up. Security appreciation is different. Security appreciation, I say it's from the heart up. And what that means is basically it's the shift from awareness, right? Knowing, to appreciation, caring. When employees appreciate how security protects their own lives, behavior changes permanently. This is also like the security appreciation gap, right? The chasm between an employee's intellectual understanding of risk, which is, again, awareness, and the emotional commitment to act on that knowledge, which is appreciation. If I appreciate security, that's because it means something to me. It matters to me. It's like security for me personally is like, okay, I've got a home security system, and that home security system is on like while we're gone, of course, to protect our home and our stuff. But more than anything, it's on while we're home, especially while we're sleeping, to protect my loved ones. It gives me notification that, okay, somebody just kicked in the door or they broke a window and the dog's barking and the alarm's going off. And I know that law enforcement's being called and I'm being called to action myself. And so I have that layer of protection because it means something and it matters to me because it's there to assist me and watch my back and protect my loved ones. And it's the same thing with basic stuff like a password manager or password management in general. Like it's the same, like even in my own personal life, a password manager is not just there to manage my passwords. It's there so when I pass away, my wife and kids have access to it so they can access all of my accounts so they can be taken care of. So I don't look at these tools as just like this thing I got to do to save me a little bit of time. I manage my passwords because I got to have a different passcode. It's there to like make my life better for my family. And when you frame it in that regard, like you can't deny that they're not going to grasp that concept.
Well, hold on. But it's a different, as I was trying to explore with you, it's the difference between saying my home security, my family security, my kids, the parental controls you put in place, like Australia's got the no social media until you're 16 years of age. And they're talking about the same things across multiple countries now and the States as well as in Europe and UK. So we've got all of those things make sense. Like we've had breaches for like Vodafone Germany, for example, had a breach only last year of about 45 million euros, which was about authentication failures on the eSIM profiles. And you've got OpenAI, which has allegedly 20 million profiles were given to a threat actor. So you can see anybody caught in that will have a appropriately AI-powered phishing attack in the near future. That to a lot of people means, okay, that's personal to me because that's my personal information.
Yes.
But the information I'm talking about when I'm in a company setting, it's my name and it's my employee email. Now, if they touch payroll, that's a bigger difference. Yeah, that goes to personal.
Sure.
So how do you, I'm still not clear on how we alter the training or what that, as we said, strategic human firewall should be, which bolsters the training that they have to do. Because I still believe they still need to do that training. They still need to know, this is what we're asking to do. You must do it. It's mandatory. And these are the consequences. You apply that to kids when you're trying to tell them, you go into school, you misbehave. This is the consequence. You get no technology when you get home. Okay. And then and so there is no arguments. But you're trying to go the step further by explaining why that rule is in place and to try and get them to invest themselves personally in the value of that rule rather than saying it's all about consequences. It's like carrot and stick. Is that right? Yes, it is. So it's trying to move away from there's a stick. Yes, as you would with the seatbelt. Penalty points, law infractions, violations, whatever. And also threat to safety, personal safety, potential crash causing not just yourself, but other people. We've seen those advertisements in the past. They don't really seem to show them anymore. But how do you bridge the chasm? Like, what does that training now look like?
Y'all aren't going to like what I have to say, but I think that this has weight. Okay, so Facebook is back to work. Google is back to work. Everybody's back to work. Everybody's in person. You know why? Because working from home just wasn't cutting it. There's a reason for that. We require interaction. We are a social creature, okay? Cybersecurity training is not social at all. It's do this, don't do that, or else. Nobody wants to be lectured, told what to do, barked at, or there's consequences. I find that a dialogue is much more effective than a monologue, talking at someone versus having a conversation with them. And so when you have a conversation with people in regards to this is what security is, this is what security isn't, because we all have all these like false notions as to what security isn't. And once you engage them in that dialogue, they're like, so let's put it this way. 95% of the presentations that I deliver are in person at this point, right? Because prior to COVID, I was on the road, in airplanes, hotels, rent-a-cars, at conferences, in front of live audiences. And it was great. And then COVID hit and it was like done. Lockdown, flatline. That was the end of it. I did some virtual stuff, lots of virtual stuff, kept me alive. Great. Around 2023 and a half, the phone starts to ring again. And I start to hear from CISOs, listen, we've been doing the whole compliance, phishing simulation training thing. It's good. But what we really need is we just want our employees to care about security. We just want them to care. Like, what can you do there? And I'm like, yeah, that's easy. Just have a conversation with them. And so when you engage the employee one-on-one, when they walk into the room in a live event, right? They're literally like this.
Arms folded.
Hands crossed, right? And then they sit down with a scowl on their face And they're like, I am here because I have to be here. My boss told me I have to be here. Okay. And then after like 20 minutes of engaging in a conversation, I ask them questions. And in a response, they answer, and then they ask me questions. And we begin this dialogue. And some of the questions I begin to ask them revolve around, what security is and what security isn't, what kind of systems you currently have in place as an individual for your own personal protection, and how is this working out for you? And some of the questions I ask are like, how many of you are using a different passcode across multiple accounts? And if I get 15% of the audience, and this is every audience everywhere, if I get 15% of the audience to say, yes, I'm using a different passcode across multiple accounts, that's a lot. Which means 85% are using the same passcode. And then I ask a similar question, how many of you are using two-factor authentication across all your critical accounts? If I get 20% of the room to raise their hand, then that's a lot. Now this is like in their personal life, right? Work is a different story, but personal life matters, okay? And so then, as we're having this dialogue, then I show them resources like Have I Been Pawned that show like billions and billions and billions of passwords being compromised. By the current stats, it's about 15 billion passwords compromised. And then I show them like how many millions and millions of people are using the same passcode across multiple accounts. And they're like, that's kind of a bad thing. Like I need to kind of like up my game. And then I show them how to use a password manager. And they're like, oh, well, what if the password manager gets hacked? Which I am asked every single, presentation. I'm like, well, there have been vulnerabilities in password managers, sure, but none in which the data has been compromised, unencrypted and so forth. But so you find the low-hanging fruit is the 15 billion passwords on the dark web and so forth. And then like, okay, so what if I am searching something on Google and I click a link? How does that affect me? Like they're asking, how do I protect my credit card? This is where they're at. This is their digital literacy. This is their cyber hygiene. Like they don't know. And like they don't know what to do when they search Google. And if you affect them where they're at, and have a dialogue with them and show them the absurdity of why don't you use a password manager, and just like kind of walk them through it and how effective it is to manage your life. And even when you pass away and all that stuff, like they begin to the arms go down and they begin to lean in and they're like, oh, I didn't think that this program was going to be like that. I thought it was going to be like you barking at me the whole time. My boss made me come here. I'm so glad that I came. I didn't think it was going to be like this. This is good. Okay, now what do I got to do? Like that's how you change hearts in order to change minds. You have a dialogue. I call it like the kitchen table effect, the multiplier effect, where successful training ends with the employee teaching the concepts to their family, cementing the lessons for life in their personal life. And of course, on the job, that is not difficult to do. And prior to giving them all, okay, these are all the different things that you have to do, it's important to understand the human nature of security. So I'll ask you, and we've had this dialogue before. I was like, and part of the process is breaking down people's understanding of what security is and isn't, because people don't truly get risk management. So I ask my audiences, and I tell them, I'm a guy that's got 20 plus security cameras. So what does that say about me? What does that say about my disposition, my worldview? I must be what?
Okay. I know this question, so I'm going to fall into the trap. And I did say this. Paranoid.
You did say it, because that's, while it might be excessive, okay, I'm not paranoid. Paranoia is truly, the American Medical Association calls it a mental health disease. Okay, and that's what it is. It is somebody who is at odds with their universe. They are truly, it's a disease of the mind, and they are out of control. Whereas security is truly about gaining a degree of control. But we as a culture, we as a society, we as a species, we view security as, oh, if he or she is engaged in all these practices, they must worry all day long. They must think that people are out to get them. That's what we do. And we do that primarily because when it comes to security, backing up a little bit, we as human beings are what is called an interdependent species. Now, I'm giving you the background of what I do in these first 20 minutes so that you can do this, or you can all do this. You break them down so that they understand what security is and isn't, but you have to understand first and foremost why we as humans do what we do. That biological impulse versus the intellectual understanding, right? And that means the internal conflict between our evolved survival instincts, right? And our modern knowledge of digital risks. And what this boils down to is we as humans, by default, trust each other. That's what we do. We are an interdependent species. And as an interdependent species, that means that we depend on each other for our survival. And that means that we need to trust each other. And that means that throughout our entire lives, when the phone rang, when the email came in, when we got a text message, when we met people in public, at school, on the job, out at a bar, you want to and need to trust that the person that you're communicating with has your best interests, that person is good by their nature and they don't mean to do you harm. You want to and need to give the benefit of the doubt. And that's how everybody approaches everything every day, all day long. And the bad guys know this. And the bad guys use truthful scenarios with a twist. And they do that all day, every day, and they bombard us. And all day long, we're fending off all this truth. And if you understand that you trust by default and your reaction biologically is going to be to automatically trust what's going on in front of you, then yeah, you're probably going to click that link or engage with that password reset because you got a text message from someone who posed as the CISO and the caller ID on the phone says it was the home office. Like, we're going to do that because that's what we do. But if you don't explain that, like on a one-to-one level, they're not going to truly understand it because they don't want to. They don't want to believe that these bad things can happen to them. You know, when you watch the 6 o'clock news and something bad happens in a neighborhood somewhere, and the local TV reporter comes in and she interviews the neighbor, and she, you know, says to the neighbor, "So what do you think about what happened, like to your neighbor? Like, what do you think about what happened?" And they always say, "Oh, they were such nice people," but you don't think things like that would ever happen here. Because nobody ever wants to think that these things can happen to them. We're pre-wired to be optimistic in that regard. We don't want to think that bad things can happen to us. And we think that the CISO is sending us this security training because she's paranoid or he's paranoid. They're making us do this. This isn't going to happen to me. This isn't my job. And if you don't have this level of dialogue with an employee, how are they ever going to want to engage in compliance training? They're just not. It requires an in-person, let's have a conversation about this. Don't get me started.
I think I have. No, I do get it. I think that trust and denial are what's causing more incidents than anything else could. I do agree that humans default to trust. I'd say the exceptions are lawyers. We default to distrust until we mistrust, until we need to trust you. But attackers do exploit that. I also think that and I'm sure the listeners don't have the same issue, but there are some places I've seen where the culture isn't there, which is needed. And this is the culture which must normalize error and reward early reporting. So if something does go wrong, don't shame people because they've clicked something that they shouldn't have. Don't shame them because somebody was tailgating and they were thinking that there was a little old lady coming through and you're just trying to be nice and being polite and pay it forward because you had somebody gave you a nice tip at the coffee, whatever was going on in your day, and you just let this nice lady through, not realizing she's the person that's going around swiping all the confidential information from the desk. You know, it's all that kind of silliness that we as humans can fall into the trap to. But if everybody's the same, the culture is, we're all in the same boat. We're all invested in the right way. And also, I just remind you that even though there is a come back to work mantra coming across many companies, there's still hybrid working is still the norm in many, many countries. So even like a 3-2-day, 3-day in the office, yeah, but then you're still at home. So your home security systems are still a potential source for attacking. So your Wi-Fi system through to your routers, through to your service provider, they can be used even without you knowing as part of a springboard attack for a denial of service attack against somebody else. But you don't realize because your bandwidth on you went down a small bit during the night. And hey, presto, somebody's been uploaded some malicious software into your systems. You've no idea. Or worse, you could have children allowing access inadvertently through their computer systems into your home system, and they then inadvertently are able to access your personal information from your personal laptop, or even worse, your work laptop. Yes. I'm just creating enough noise for people. Hopefully you're not listening to this late at night and getting super stressed out and anxious, because there are solutions. Okay? Yeah. There are solutions. You can make yourself safe and you can sleep well at night. It's just, I'm just super conscious that we have, even like if you've got a VPN, I remember there was something last year, I think they called it Cyberstorm 2025, Inca Pharma's breach. There was 3.9 million customer records were breached. And then a US oil company's VPN was illicitly accessed. So you can believe that your company's systems, because they put a lot of money in place, that they're all secure and safe. And you've got these amazing geniuses out there putting all these security measures in place and protocols and ring fencing critical items and secure systems and on-site systems and cloud systems. It all sounds amazing, but it still comes back to the person, because let's look at the AI piece. It's becoming, phishing attacks are becoming indistinguishable from legitimate interests. And I read one report that 87% of organizations were reporting AI-enabled attacks in 2025. Oh. So whilst we're using it to make our jobs easier, so are they.
At this point, you mentioned shame, which I'd like to discuss that just a little bit. What you want to build is a form of cognitive load management, right? Which is essentially building security habits designed to work when mental bandwidth is at its lowest, exhaustion, stress, multitasking, right? But like what you have to overcome as a result of that is what we call the silent failure, right? Which is a compromise of the wetware, which wetware being your cognitive abilities, your brain, right? That triggers no technical alarms and often goes unreported due to the shame barrier, right? And the shame barrier is the emotional wall that prevents victims from reporting a breach. We break this barrier and we say nothing because we're shamed. We think we're going to get in trouble. And it shouldn't be like that. Like if you have the open dialogue ahead of time and you express like, look, this is normal. This is okay. We understand. And at the same time, like have that dialogue with them and test. But you have to sit them down and have a conversation. I think that I would say as a dad, right? I have a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old girls. They have softened me up. They have shaped my understanding of human communication in such a way where I no longer bang, 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 bang over the head. I have more empathy, more sympathy, more engagement, more understanding of feelings. And I am not asking any one of you to take your 50-year-old coworker by the hand and give him a hug. I'm not asking for any of that. I'm just saying maybe if we actually kind of sat back a little bit and had some one-on-one or, 1 on 100 and have a conversation that maybe they would come around and they would look at phishing simulation training as, hey, I got this. This makes sense to me. I want to understand this. This is important to me. It matters to me. I appreciate the value of this in my life.
Yeah, I do like it. I think it's a tricky one. I know that for me as a parent, I've had to adjust my parenting style because one of my children has ADHD and ODD. That requires a very different approach. And actually that approach I've used on teams in the past to great effect, actually. So just you can learn a lot in having to check yourself and your approach and your style to influence people more effectively. I'm just curious about one of the obvious questions around this is saying, okay, so we're going to have a staff, say as a company of 10,000, 1,000, 100 employees, whatever it is. Every year, I get them to do the mandatory training, which takes about 60 minutes, 30 to 60 minutes every year. Now, there's a cost. So say it was 10,000 times 60 minutes. We know what that is. And that's a cost, which has a price tag against it because you're asking everybody from the cheapest to the most expensive employees out there. Cheapest is quite a derogatory term, but you know what I mean. But it's just the different salary levels. And that's a cost to the company. Now you're saying we should have live demonstrations or role playing or monthly stories or micro nudges of some sort to affect a cultural and behavioral shift across the company. There's a cost to all of that. So just putting it back on you, not telling us what the prices are, by the way, because that's for negotiation. All the lawyers know that's true. But how do you dispel the resistance to having to spend more, do more when there's a real cost? Say you have 10,000 staff and each one of them will have to sit down and do something live with somebody else. How do you affect that in a most cost-effective manner and ensuring that they see said they wanted metrics, but they have to get a return on investment in any way? So how do you shape that narrative? What's your response?
I've done presentations where I was on a stage at a company location in front of a live audience, and then it was all broadcast to 4,000 employees across the globe. That doesn't seem like a difficult thing to me. If you can, log into a device, you can log into any platform and then the employees that I'm actually in front of, we're engaged. We're talking, we're having a conversation, we're discussing the risks in our biology and the whys and the myths. And we're having this conversation. The audience that I'm in front of, they're asking the exact same questions that the same 4,000 people have in their minds.
Yes, true.
So they act as, that entire company's voice. That's a solvable issue. That's not a huge investment. There's that, or there's just keep doing what you're doing. And, you can keep your fingers crossed and you can check the metrics and you can hope that the people that don't get it eventually get it, but they're not going to get it. Certain people are wired a certain way. And there's only so much hammering you can do. And I say that because like that's what I see. And no offense to security compliance training, it's kind of like a hammer. Whereas like kind of what I do is kind of like a scalpel. You know, it's kind of like carving out like, let's just kind of get through this together because this is like a big deal. Security is fundamentally to most people, it's about worry. It's about fear. You know, like, I don't know if most people truly understand that there is 97% of all the people that you will ever meet in the course of your life. 97%. I've been doing this for 30 years. I study the bad actors. 97% of all the people you will ever meet in the course of your life are good. They have good intentions. They're, by their nature, worthy of your trust. Do some of them lie? Do they do things inappropriately sometimes? Can they be deceptive? Sure. But in general, they have good intentions. Okay. They're worthy of your trust, which also means that 2 to 3% of the world's population you cannot trust them because the medical community calls them antisocial personality disorders, sociopaths, psychopaths, which are essentially hardcore narcissists that look at you and I as we are their natural prey. They are the lion and the wolf. We are the gazelle and the rabbit. And that's how they look at the world. And they're organized today. They're working hard to get paid. And as many of you may or may not know, like organized crime today is not what it was 30, 40 years ago. It's not the Italian mafia. Today, it's compounds of, 2,000 and 3,000 people in certain parts of Southeast Asia and other parts of the world that they've got, the UN has described this as there's probably about 300,000 victims of human trafficking whose job it is 18 hours a day to scam us. Think about that for a second. Google it, UN. That means that they've got bad guys, organized crime, 300,000 essentially slave laborers that are being tortured and beaten if they don't meet their quotas, getting paid pennies a day in compounds that are 80 to 100 acres with connections to the internet and computers, and they've got housing and food, but they're working all day long. And I've met these people. I've engaged them, and all the various scams that I essentially scam bait what's going on. I don't necessarily bait the perpetrators. I want to understand what they're doing and who they are and what their motivations are and how they choose their victims. So when you get those wrong number text messages, most of us mark it as, spam and such. I respond to all of them. I want to engage the perpetrators. And that's who I end up meeting over WhatsApp video within a week, and they've got voice cloning and digital face overlay in real time. And it's a young Asian female that I'm communicating with who has the face overlay of a beautiful Russian model. That's what I see. And that's not going to stop. That builds trust, and I'm communicating with the scammer 6, 8, 10 times a day. Why? Because she keeps reaching out to me via AI. And that dialogue is like, good morning, dear. How did you sleep last night? Good morning, dear. What are you having for breakfast today? And then what do you have going on this morning? And then she responds with, I'm going to yoga this morning. And then I'm meeting my girlfriends for lunch. Why? To normalize it, to build the relationship, to engage in normal, trustful behavior so that in the end, I believe and trust that she has my best interest in mind. And if I'm a human that is lonely, which 25% of all human beings wake up every day and their default is they experience loneliness. If I am lonely after a week or two of engaging with this woman, my loneliness dissipates and my focus becomes her. And she is the puppeteer and I'm the puppet. And that is a lot of people. That's 25% of your employees. That's a lot of people. We're just vulnerable. We're just afraid and fearful and lonely and scared. And that's a lot of people. And I don't think I'm being hokey here when I say that. Like, that's just humanity, And security awareness training doesn't do that.
Yeah. So I'm really hoping that our listeners today understand why I wanted Robert on our podcast. It presents a different color, which in the vast track legal world that we live in, that it is sometimes good to kind of step back and revisit all the things we've accepted that we believe aren't broken, but maybe they're not broken, but they could be improved or enhanced to something else with an extra layer. Before we go on to my final question, I do have a quick question, maybe to help people. So whether it's home security or company security, is there one tip, just a basic tip you would say is the hill you die on that you would want everybody to start doing if they haven't started? Hopefully they have.
Look at security like the same way you look at mental health and diet and just overall well-being. Like, look at it as that, because that's kind of what it is. If you have ever studied like Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, at the base of the triangle are our physiological needs. Safety, which is, eating, drinking, sleeping, like our physiological needs, consuming food and nourishment, foraging, right? And right above that is safety, security, stability, structure, and protection. Right above that. It's right there. And so if you recognize that this is an extremely important aspect of our lives, security is as important as taking care of your mind and body. It is. Then I think that like all the other aspects of love and relationships and self-actualization and all that stuff, like as human needs, all comes easier. It's part of personal balance. And I don't know that anybody's ever looked at security as part of personal balance, but I think it is. And we as a culture, many of us just take security for granted. We do. We just think that government's going to protect us. Law enforcement's going to protect us. That's not how it works. It's called personal responsibility. When you're on a flight, which, we're on planes, and the flight attendant is providing the instructions for, safety. And what does she say when the mask comes down?
Oh, yourself first before your children. Yeah.
Right. Put it on yourself first. And why is that? Because you have to take care of yourself first in order to take care of anybody else in life in general, right? And that means nourishing your body with good foods, consuming enough fluids, getting enough sleep. We're no good without any of that. And then from there, safety, security, stability, structure, and protection, you get that in order, taking care of others and teaching them security and engaging in security appreciation is easy.
Thank you. There is a question I always like to ask all my guests. It's a two-parter. So what's one thing that people get wrong about the work you do?
Yeah. When I send off a request to take a look at what I got going on and look at my work, and this is what I do, 9 out of 10 times, they forward the email to their IT department to look at what I do and compare it to what they're doing on their checklist. Oh, he's not talking about this thing that they have to do, and this thing that they have to do, and this thing that they have to do. So why do we need him? And it's like, well, that's not what it is. It's to make what you're already doing more effective, to make it better, to make them care about what you're already doing. My job is ultimately to get the employee to drink the Kool-Aid of security, to get them to care about it, to get them to effectively recognize risk because it means something and it matters to them. Yeah, I provide security awareness training, but not until I get them to realize, oh, I've been looking at security all wrong. I didn't think that security was that. I thought it was this. And now that I recognize, like, this is a good thing, I want more of it. That's what I do, but that's not always easy to communicate in an email.
True. No, thank you for that. My last part of the question was, what's the one thing you find most fun out of the work that you do?
When the guy at the end of the presentation comes up to me, he's like, hey, I've been coming to these things all my adult life. I'm here because I'm forced to be here. I didn't want to be here. I didn't think I needed this. I pretty much know all this stuff, but I didn't think it was going to be like this. I didn't really think I needed it, but I'm so glad I came. And I wish my spouse was here because she really needs this too.
That's brilliant. That's lovely. No, honestly, I'm really thrilled that you've been giving up your time to join us here on the podcast. Personally, I think of security a bit like a garden. So if you neglect it, the weeds will flourish. If you tend it, it'll bloom beautifully. But of course, no matter how hard you work, that fox will still get in at some point, steal a few strawberries or whatever you've been growing in there. But at least you've been able to identify it and maybe you report it to IT, obviously not for a garden, but you know what I mean. So I think that's the best way I kind of view the security. But I do especially want to thank you again for joining us. And to all our listeners, please continue to stay curious, stay skeptical, and step beyond the fine print. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Robert.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Fine Print. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss the next episode. And if you have any burning questions you want us to cover in a future episode, send them to beyondthefineprint@rmoklegal.com. See you next time.